Hey everybody, this is Alex Merced from AlexMercedCoder.com, and yeah, it's Sunday morning, and what I want to do is do a video on HTMX. So HTMX has been getting a lot of discussion lately, um, along with other frameworks like Alpine, and there's a reason why these are getting a lot of attention. So let's just talk about sort of like the history, the context. So, bottom line is this. Once upon a time, the way generally things worked is you had monolithic applications. You still have them today, sometimes. So the idea here, when we say a monolith, it means that the back end and front end are all handled by the same application. Okay, usually via templating. Okay, and generally the way that works is that you'll have something like this where you'll see like, oh, I have HTML, or you might see like a div or an H1, and then generally you have some sort of templating syntax. We'll say double curly brackets where you're injecting variables. So in this case, title or username. Okay, and then basically what would happen is that this file, in whatever the templating syntax is, and oftentimes there's a templating syntax that's usually based on the language that you're using. So if you're building your backend in Python, there's Jinja. If you're building your backend in Ruby, you have ERB, embeddable Ruby templates. If you're building in PHP, PHP itself was a templating language, aside from being a general purpose programming language, but there's also Blade templates, and so forth and so forth. Every language has some multiple templating libraries. And the way these would work is that when someone would send a request to your server, you would generally conjure up one of these templates and you would send that template data, and there'd be a render function that would run on your server. And essentially what that render function did on your server is that it would just take that template, take the ball of data you gave it, and then replace all these little templating sections, so anywhere where you have the templating syntax, and replace it with the appropriate HTML. Okay, and generate the HTML. So the HTML is generated dynamically from the backend, and this can be great. So this basically means most of your business logic can be handled by your preferred language of choice in the backend, and this is great. So if you like Python, you can use Python. If you like PHP, Rust, Go, whatever you like, you can use that. But there's still a need for interactivity on the website. Okay, like at the end of the day, like back end doesn't necessarily replace the need for front end JavaScript for certain situations, like creating a loading spinner, or animating something. All of this requires sort of like front end flourishes. So usually what would happen is that you'd either use just plain splash in some front end JavaScript either through just plain vanilla DOM manipulation or jQuery. Okay, and while jQuery made things definitely a lot easier, it's just like you still have to do that context switching of switching between HTML with your templating language, which generally worked with your preferred backend language, and then JavaScript on the front end. Okay, so then what happened is that things kind of moved further in that direction. Okay, in a sense where basically more and more of the front end moved towards just being completely in JavaScript. Then you start having frameworks like React, Quick, Vue, Angular, Svelte, Solid.js that essentially handle all of that in the front end. And even those have transformed quite a bit nowadays. Now they're starting to move a lot more of the work to the server through frameworks like Next.js, Nuxt.js, SvelteKit, etc. Okay, so they're moving more and more to the server as well, for a variety of different benefits and reasons that I'm not going to get into right now, not the purpose of this particular video. But what about the people who like using, again, Python as their backend, PHP, Ruby, and they still don't want to write so much JavaScript to get that same result, to get that nice front end interaction? And so there's been a couple different new sort of paradigms. Particularly, there is HTMX, which we're going to talk about in this video, which basically, instead of you having to sprinkle in some jQuery or some JavaScript, you can do a lot of the stuff that you would sprinkle in purely in HTMX. It can be used for websites of any scale, except that, you know, generally you're just, it's sprinkled in because, again, a lot of the work is generally being handled by your backend through templating. Okay, so generally the idea is that, hey, you're using Python with Jinja templates, you're using PHP with Blade templates, you're using maybe even JavaScript with like EJS templates or something like that. But the idea is that when it comes to the front end code, you know, you're not doing anything too crazy as far as any additional JavaScript you would need. So then HTMX can help you bring in those additional sort of interactive bits. And instead of thinking of it as like using JavaScript to manipulate the DOM, what you're doing is you're using HTMX to swap out the HTML on the page. And you allow your server to generate the HTML through templating, and then you just swap out those bits to kind of create that sort of single page application feel. Okay, now there's also something called Alpine, which I'm not going to go into as much in this video. I have in previous videos. Alpine takes a similar approach, except sort of what it's doing is making it where you can write a lot of that sort of front-end stateful JavaScript in your HTML through properties. So you can sit there and say, hey, this div has this state, and when you click, I'm going to manipulate the state this way. So it's a slightly different approach. You're still writing a little bit of JavaScript, but you're kind of writing the JavaScript in your HTML. And you're writing some logic in your HTML versus HTMX, where it's mostly like, okay, if I click this, make a request to this thing, and then just swap out the thing. So basically, really, whatever we're requesting is handling the logic of what happens. So there really isn't any state in the front end. You're not tracking any variables in your front end. Well, Alpine, there is state. It's just a much more simplified version of state for, again, those little like flourishes, because again, the context here is your backend is handling most of the business logic. Okay, it doesn't mean it's only, like, I think a mistake a lot of people say is because you generally only use HTMX and Alpine when you only need the splash a little bit of that front end interactivity, that means you can only use it for like small projects. That's not the case. You can use it for very large scale projects. It's just that, again, the bulk of the business logic is being handled by your backend framework in your backend templating, and you're using HTMX Alpine to kind of splash in that front end interactivity to kind of create that more single page application sort of feel. And again, if you prefer doing a lot of that work in the back end, handling a lot of that logic through templating, this has been a godsend for those people, and also a great. And then again, you'll see here, I'm going to just do it with some plain HTML page. I'm not going to even have a back end, and you can still do a lot of really cool stuff with HTMX. Okay, so let's show you some examples. So I'm going to have my index.html. Okay, I'm going to set up my boilerplate. I'm going to set a header, main, footer. In the main, we're going to have just like a display box. So we're going to give it a class of display or an ID of display. Okay, and then we'll have like several links, which I'll put in a div called links. Actually, we'll have that in the nav. Okay. Cool. Trying out HTMX. Oh, not HTML, HTMX. So now let's go look up the HTMX script tag. So I'm going to head over to the HTMX website. And literally all we have to do is we just add this script tag. That's it. That's all it takes. So I'm going to add this script tag. Okay. Okay, my HTMX page. I'm going to open this up with Live Server, which allows there to, essentially Live Server is just providing me that backend, which is a really simple static server. Okay. And what I'm going to do is, okay, so we have that div there of ID display. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to have, we'll just have some buttons. First, let me just create a few different HTML pages. So I'm going to create like a hello.html, which is literally just going to be an h1 hello. I don't even need all that boilerplate. I'm just going to have hello world. because I don't need to build the whole HTML page, because this is not meant to be a standalone HTML document. This is just going to be a chunk of HTML that I'm going to want to swap out on that main page. Okay, and we'll say another one for goodbye.html, h1 goodbye. Cool. So now I can do that. Nice. So, and again, so far I haven't written any JavaScript. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to write a button that says hello, and a button that says goodbye. And then what we do is we express what we want to happen through these HTMX properties or attributes. So again, no JavaScript. So I'm going to say, hey, I want, when something happens, I want this button to send a GET request. So I'll say, hey, hx get, I think is the property. And hx get will send the request to / hello.html. So that's going to be where the GET request gets sent. Then I need to express, hey, what triggers this? Okay, so hx trigger, and that's going to be a click. So when you click on this, that's what triggers it. Okay, and basically what I wanted to do is I wanted to hx swap. I wanted to swap the inner HTML. So basically what it's going to do is going to take whatever target element I'm targeting and swap its inner HTML, which is generally the default, so I don't need to specify it per se. So it's going to swap, so in this case, that div. And then I'm going to specify, hey, where am I putting that? That's going to be the target, hx target. And I am targeting the thing that has a ID of display. So I just use a CSS selector. So essentially I'm saying, hey, when you click on this button, swap out the inner HTML, that display div, with the contents of hello.html. Okay? So let's see if that works. So if I click on hello, and there it is. See, we saw it got replaced. But it feels like a hello, like a single page application, because it's not reloading the entire HTML document. It's actually just under the hood, it's making that request, taking that HTML and just swapping the div. So all that JavaScript DOM stuff is happening, but HTMX is sort of like abstracting it away. Okay, so then now I can just do the same thing with this button. So we'll just copy over pretty much all the same properties, except the different this time it's going to be goodbye.html. And now, boop, 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 boop. Okay, neat. Now the cool thing is it's going to use some CSS to allow you to be able to do some cool stuff. So like, let's inspect this real quick. So open up the body. Let's take a look at that div real quick. So there's the div display. Okay, pay attention to its class piece. So I'm going to click on hello. Okay, goodbye, hello, goodbye. It's happening really fast. But essentially what's happening, it is toggling some classes, which you can see inside of here. Okay, let me go over here and find where the reference. So we go to HTMX CSS classes. So it says like there's these CSS classes. So apply to either the element for the element specified with HX indicator. So that's if you want to do like loading things. And that's if you want to have something like invisible until the indicator thing kicks in. Apply to a new piece of content before it is swapped. Remove it after it is settled. Okay, so HTMX added. So then what I could do, okay, is I could do something like, hey, .htmx added. Okay, I can say, hey, border 5 pixels solid green. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to target that div with the ID of a display. And I'm going to give it a transition. Transition of border. Oh, actually, why am I writing this in the footer? I'll fix that in a second. Border 0.3 seconds. Okay, so let me actually put a style tag so you can actually write the CSS. There we go. And then we copy these CSS styles into the style tag. You can tell it's early on a Sunday morning. Okay, perfect. Now let's see if that works. So theoretically, what should happen is that when the page switches, okay, that div should have a border for a moment, and we're gonna see that. And actually, let's make this like 2 seconds, so it's like it plays out. Okay, and you see that border for a second, so you see it like happen. Okay, so you can create like little transition effects. Okay, you maybe trigger like an animation. Okay, it's like disappearing at the moment because of, but you can create like little quick animations or something like that, little transitions. And that's the purpose of that. And then the cool thing is I can also, let's see here, apply to a target after the content is swapped, removed after it is settled. So I can do something like .htmx settle link. So that way it's like it's on both ends. So let's see here. And again, you see that sort of effect happening as I switch between. Okay. So basically, it's so easy to do transitions and like loaders and things like that without having to write any JavaScript. Okay, basically you can just stick to your HTML, CSS. You can you can dynamically generate stuff through your templating in the back end. And there are extensions to HTMX where you can actually add like templating in the front end. I actually haven't tried that out before. Let's try that out in a second. But basically, there's a lot of stuff you can do, and there are like JavaScript methods and stuff you can customize in the back end if you really want to kind of get into the JavaScript, but you don't have to. That's sort of like the point. Okay. Is there anywhere I can see like those are kind of extensions? HTMX extensions. Here we go. You can find the source for the bundled extension at. You'll need to include the JavaScript file for the extension. So let's see what they are. Alpine Morph, an extension for using Alpine JS Morph plugin as a swapping mechanism. HTMX. WebSockets, server sent events, response targets, remove me, preload, multi-swap, morphdom, idiomorph, include vals. Okay, I don't see the one. I saw someone like use this one for like a client where you can, where you can use like a templating. I guess that's not like an official extension. Let's see here. HTMX using mustache with HTMX. Let's see if I can find it. Client-side templating with mustache and 8. There we go. Okay, so so here would be the script tags. So you'd bring in this client-side templates library. Okay, although in this case it's implying I'd have to go download it from somewhere. Mustache, and it has it for mustache, nunchucks, and handlebars. Okay. Does it show me where they get the client-side templates library? Okay, I'll have to go look it up. HTMX. Well, the point is you could also then work in templating where basically you could send a request to a page and then just do templating on the client side. Now, exactly how that would work, I don't know. I think you're able to specify data you can send over, so that way you can then use that for any kind of templating. Now, what I'm doing here, and again, you don't have to. Again, you can do this in a completely stateless way where your templates do all the data logic or the dynamic data work, and then basically this is just kind of handling that sort of swapping between pages, loaders, little simple things. So that way your larger project can just kind of focus mostly on the back end handling, again, all that logic, which is, again, less state. Your front end design becomes much sort of simpler and easier to think through, because it's just like, if you're the front end dev, you're just thinking, okay, well, I want to go get this page, I want to go get that page, I submit this form to that URL, and then basically I should get the right content back. Then the backend developer then just has to like implement all that logic to generate the right content. So yeah, that's HTMX. That's what everyone's really excited about. Again, where it's really exciting is when you just don't want to use JavaScript, which means you're probably doing your backend in something that is not JavaScript. If you are doing your backend in JavaScript, then it makes sense. Then it's, I don't know, to me it's still maybe a little less compelling. Then maybe Alpine still makes sense. or if you really want to kind of have a unified experience, that's where like Next, Nux, SvelteKit are really provide sort of really compelling use cases. It just depends on sort of like what developer experience you want. It's not like HTMX is going to replace those things, because there's a lot of JavaScript developers out there who'd rather do things in JavaScript. But there's also a lot of Python, Ruby, Go, Rust, C, C Sharp developers who are going to not want to do everything in JavaScript and actually want to avoid doing JavaScript if possible. And HTMX makes this possible. So hopefully you guys find this interesting. My name is Alex Merced from AlexMercedCoder.dev. Make sure to head over to devnursery.com, join the Slack community, and follow me on LinkedIn. Have a great day and enjoy.